Hello everyone. Now today is time for something a little bit different. I'm going to, in front of your very eyes, do a rear shock service in one continuous shot and in real time. Now this is what we call an air can service, and it should be part of your regular maintenance. As always, please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on any videos. So we're going to film this in one continuous shot, but sometimes the main screen might be filled with close-ups. We're going to come back and get these close-ups later, and you can follow the continuous footage down in the corner below. So this is something that I'm going to do on a RockShox rear shock, but the theory is pretty consistent whether it's Fox or whatever, so you can follow along at home. Now what you need, or what I'm going to do this service with, is some light, it's called SRAM butter, but it's basically just very thin suspension grease. And you want to use suspension grease, you don't want to use anything too kind of viscous and thick. We've got some isopropyl alcohol cleaner, which is WD-40's contact cleaner, that goes by its name, and some thin suspension fluid. This is 3 weight, you don't really want to use anything thicker than that. I have got a valve cool remover. To be honest, this is a bit of a luxury and something you not necessarily need. I'm just a bit of a scaredy cat when it comes to this sort of thing. I've got a 6mm, but that depends on what fits through that size, which I'm going to come back through later. I've got a pick, you can get it again, you don't really need this, it's me being a scaredy cat. And I've got a shock pump. Now before we get started, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take off our valve cover, our valve cap, and we're going to take a note of our pressure. This means we don't have to do any guessing games beforehand, but please note that if your shock pump registers, say, 200 psi, the pressure from the shock itself is having to inflate the chamber of the pump, which means it was probably closer to 210, for instance. So what we're going to do, just screw it on, take a note, and then we're going to write that down somewhere. Well, you don't have to, I'm just very forgetful. So I'm going to write it down somewhere, but you do what you want. You do what you feel is best. So you also can see, and it's just kind of, I've done it for the length of the video, that I have already removed the lower part of any linkage or bushing on there. This is so the air can come over. It depends what you're going to need. You might need a bushing tool or something like that. Sometimes you can press or pull them out with a vise. But yeah, just please note that that's something you need to do before this service even begins. So I'm going to note down my PSI, which was 230. And this is where the pick comes in, and it is just me being a little bit nervy. Even though I know I've got the pressure out, I'm just going to get that last tiny little bit. I always get nervous. And then to make my life easier, this is a valve core tool, and I'm just going to take that out as well. You don't really need to do that. It's something that perhaps, like I said, is me being a bit delicate, but it's what I like to do, and it does make a later part of the service slightly easier. So if you have got this tool, remove it. If not, that's not a problem. So that is all removed. So this is where I was saying, if you've got the eyelet up here, I'm going to run a 6mm through. Now I'm running a 6mm Allen key through because this is a 6mm shaft. If you've got an 8mm shaft, I suggest running an 8mm Allen key through, and so on and so forth. This air can here should be hand tight, but that's not always the case. Now, if yours is a bit stubborn, you can use a strap wrench ideally, or you can use an old inner tube. Old inner tube allows you to get loads of purchase. I'm gonna hopefully get mine off using a bit of blue towel. Let's see how we go. Oh yeah, it's going, look at that. So we just keep turning it off. As you can see, the shock has kind of popped up a bit because that's the negative air chamber, which is still just inflating the shock. So we're just going to go, and you might feel a bit of resistance there. That's okay. Pull it straight off. So that sits down there. Now it's important to remember any order that these things come in. This one's relatively simple. It's just got some kind of spacer assembly there, which is also a bit of a spring. So I'm just going to take that off and put it to one side. So let's have a look at our shock here. Now, shocks are really important that we visually inspect them. I'm not saying you have to get a magnifying glass out, but if you're seeing any scores or anything like that, you know, it's not playing bluff. It is because it is scored. I'm just going to give all these seals a quick wipe down, make sure they're all in good nick. And I've got a big light by the camera, so you can actually just work round. And as you point it to the light and you see the light shining down the shaft, you can also potentially see any scratches or scars or anything that's either running parallel to or perpendicular to the shaft. This is really important, okay? Because we want that to be nice and smooth. If you have got big gouges out of here, Dottie actually did a really good video on filling in scratches, but these shafts themselves aren't that expensive. I would say take it to your local suspension guru and they can probably order one in for you. Fitting them is a bit of a bigger task, but yeah, they can do that. That's something you can discuss with them. But we're gonna make sure this is nice and clean. It's also worth inspecting this O-ring here. This basically is your last line of defense against really harsh bottom outs. So if this is snapped, sometimes it might even be floating about in this air chamber. Yeah, it's toasted, it's had a few too many. To get that back on there, it's quite a thick ring, it's quite firm. You can't get it over this end normally. Normally, it's next time when you rebuild the shock, which yeah, again, is a bigger job. But at the very least, it's a really good indication to how the shock's working and if it is perhaps seeing a few too many hits. You can also look, these ones have the volume spacers just down at the bottom. I actually personally, on that Mega I'm running, I like it pretty much stock. I don't like to put too many spacers in there. Flat pedal rider, I like something that's very linear at the back, but that puts me at odds with the rest of the mountain biking world I know, who's convinced that everything needs to be as progressive as possible, but I'm just a bit of a old-fashioned type. Now this is where your isopropyl alcohol comes in. If you've got any really stubborn dirt or stuff that really isn't getting moving, you can prompt it with this. Hopefully, it's all just grease and oil and things like that, which isn't too much of an issue. I'm gonna give these a quick wipe. If you have got a seal kit, you can just replace these seals as we go. I don't think it's something that needs doing, you know, every service. You can just relube them and it will make a world of difference. Yeah, you know, you don't need to replace seals every time. It's a bit like doing a lower leg service or something. The slippier you can make those interfaces, the happier they'll be. Now, so that's everything already pretty clean. We've got ahead of it. I like to make it so the seals themselves are really dry. Now, that might seem counterintuitive, but I don't want to leave some residual oil or grease on here. I put the fresh grease on and then it just slide off. I want it to stay put. So I'm gonna leave those seals as dry as I can make them. I might even just get a little squirt of isopropyl alcohol here, just on there, just to go around. This has got a really low boiling point, isopropyl alcohol has, so it will evaporate to leave them bone dry, or so I hope. I'm gonna do that the same there. Sweet, so already that's everything all spruced up and ready to go. Give that a quick damp down. Now with your Fox shocks, they do like to have some fluid floating around in the negative air chamber. It's called float fluid, it comes in those little pouches. I like to do something similar with RockShox shocks. I think it's not gonna hurt. You don't wanna go overzealous with that, and we are gonna go very light. So we're gonna start with the greasing. So with everything to hand, we've got our grease and we've got our suspension fluid. Just gonna pop this to one side. And first of all, please, 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 I'm gonna sound like, you know, such a moody, grumpy guy. But the way you saw this is important. Never leave the lid off. Don't go in with dirty fingers and inspect it before you use it. If you pick up a big bit of grit, you'll just be undoing all your hard work and potentially damaging the shock. So I'm gonna get a little bit of grease just on my finger there and just whip around. Simple as that. This is where most of your stiction comes from. So we want to make sure that's all the interface there. You know, you don't want to be going crazy. If you do put excess on, I wouldn't worry too much because it's just going to be wiped off as soon as you install it, but at the same time, why bother? This bit just floats around with air. You don't really need to lube it up. That's just me being prissy, to be honest with you. I just don't think it can do any harm. Next, we're going to just gently grab this and do something similar. Just a quick lick of lube. If you do feel that these do have any marks in, or after that visual inspection, the seals are relatively inexpensive, and the shock itself, or the body actually isn't that expensive, but the work to install it is. So yeah, please be sensible. Just better safe than sorry. Just get new seals and you'll be a lot happier for it. So we're gonna pop that on there. I'm just gonna set that down, leaving it just there. It can just sit. This is where we get our fluids. We don't want, this is actually a large bottle for something that we're gonna use a very small amount of. So what I'm gonna do is very carefully, I'm gonna hold this up about just beyond 90 degrees. I'm just gonna put an absolute drip in, really not much, and it can just pour down inside there. It's about the same amount you'd almost, it's 1 egg's worth of oil if you were using a frying pan. That's a nice scientific measurement for you. And then, now we put the grease on this seal here, and we put the grease on this seal there. So it's really important that everything goes in square, so we don't immediately remove that grease. So we're gonna slide it through. There we go, that's just gonna sit. And there we go, so that's trapping that small amount of oil we just put in there, in the between that seal and that one, and it can just float around and lubricate. It hasn't got any damping properties. It's not something you want to be pushing on loads of the time, but it's certainly quite useful. Next, we want to make sure that our compression switch or climb mode or anything is taken off. This is going to make it a whole lot easier because we're going to have to compress this shaft just a little bit to screw this shock body back on. You'll be making your life a lot harder than it needs to be if you don't do that. So we're going to go down. Now what we want to do is, that in itself is quite a long way away from making it, but in about a quarter of the way through the shock's travel, it's where, you might have heard us talk about it on the show before, the negative and the positive air equalize. So we want to get it to that point there, because then the air can flow straight through, in through there, and into the negative air chamber. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So we're going to just compress it a bit. Oh. There we go. Oh, pressure of entertaining. Thought I wasn't going to get that one. It is a bit difficult, especially with ones like these, because they kind of dig into your hand. Maybe you could get something over the end, but I did not. I just winced it out, really. But that's the advantage of having that valve core removed, is the air can flow straight through and into the negative air, which does help no end. Now, what we're going to do here is, my hands are very greasy. There is lots of probably residual oil and grease on the outer body of the shock, thanks to that kind of contamination. So what we're going to do is we're going to clear away all our oils, move them to one side. I'm going to get some blue towel or any kind of lint-free cloth. I'm just going to give this a quick blast in, because we want to tighten this up now, and if it's greasy, it won't tighten. Now, I don't want to put a strap wrench on this now, because then it's going to make it even harder to get it off next time. It should just be hand tight, so get your 6mm or 8mm or whatever it is in there. Give it a nice good, hand tight, firm, but you don't want to be hanging off it. But the limit of your grip should suffice to be just there, unless of course you're, super powerful guy or gal who's always in the gym, who probably has a far grip strength that exceeds mine greatly. Next, we're just gonna clean our red O-ring. Nice and clean again. I'm gonna pop that on there, which is just our travel indicator. This next bit is probably me being silly again, but I would always apply a small amount of grease to that seal there. My only thought being is, as it drives in, anytime you're kind of, applying applying torque or force to a seal, I always worry that it could scar or tear. So I like to just be a bit safe. You know, it is not as common as it used to be, but things like that do fail. And it is, you know, it is bloody annoying when they do. You know, your whole shock or your whole day of riding could be ruined thanks to something as innocuous as that tiny, tiny seal on a very cheap part. Just gonna pop that in there. Tidy away our grease once more. We've got our valve tool, and we're just going to drive that in. Again, just a bit of blue towel just to help you get excess torque. You don't need to go crazy, but just you don't want it to just be, if you're slipping on the tool, it's probably not going to be in properly. And there you have it. Then you rather simply inflate your shock up back to what it was. I would say the best way to do this is inflate it to maybe 50 psi or something, just to make sure it's all good. Then take it to your bike, inflate it to your recommended pressure, remove the shock, cycle it through to the negative and the positive air chamber balance, rinse and repeat until you get it. So if you put, say, 100 psi in, then you equalize the chambers, that'll go down to, say, 80 psi. So then you just do it again. The reason you can't have your shock hanging off them is when they equalize, is sometimes that can go to a really high pressure. This shock is rated to 325 psi, but as you can imagine, under compression, that goes a lot higher. But, so yeah, pump it up. Just enough to make sure it's a happy chappy. 50 psi. There we go. Ready to just reattach the hardware at the bottom. And it's all done, simple as that. And that will make a huge amount of difference to the performance of your rear shock. So that is how to service a rear shock for an air can service in real time. Now that was something a little bit different for us and not something we've done before. So if you liked it and you want to see more of where that came from, please let us know. Maybe on the other hand you thought I was a poor man's Ainsley Harriott trying his hand at the ready, steady, cook approach. Who knows, it's not for me to say. But please do let us know how you get on and maybe even some suggestions for other things we could work on in the future. Now, if you enjoyed that and you want to see how to best set up your suspension quickly, click here for Dottie's video in Outdoors. And another place he went traveling was to the Ergon base in Germany. So click here to do a tour with those guys to understand how important ergonomics are in your bike. As always, please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.